Hi, Merlin. I'm Bill Willoughby. I'm the CEO of Cypress Development Corp. Cypress Development Corp is a lithium developer working in the state of Nevada. We have a project called the Clayton Valley Lithium Project, and we're working there to extract lithium from clay and develop a domestic U.S. source for lithium for the growing EV and battery market.
Bill, what a great introduction. Really nice to meet you. Now, you're an engineer and I'm a geologist. Hopefully we can communicate sensibly across the great divide.
The great divide of, yep.
And with a bit of logic and rationale, we can get on. Now, the project's in Nevada. It's next. Could you just kind of show me a map of where it is, just so I can kind of get my head around the location of the project, just as a starter?
Sure. Let me grab a quick screen here and share that. Okay, great. So this is our project location. We're halfway between Reno and Las Vegas in Clayton Valley. We have two other facilities that we do work out of. We have a sample prep site over by Tonopah Airport, about 30 miles to the northeast. We have a pilot plant that's in operation in Amargosa Valley, about 100 miles to the southeast towards Las Vegas. At the pilot plant, where we've been working for about a year now, putting the plant together and developing a process that's a chloralkaline leach, where we take our clay material that contains the lithium, we put it through a leach process, use the tailing separation through countercurrent decantation. Then we take that leachate and run it through a direct lithium extraction process, DLE. It's basically a process based on ion exchange, rejects the cations, concentrates the lithium, and from there we do a conventional concentration by evaporation crystallization, and we make lithium carbonate. This is our project site on the right in Clayton Valley. It's 6,500 acres. You can see it's just on the flank of this ridge line, which has a couple of large alluvial fans coming off of it. This is the clay area, which is exposed. It's a bench that extends for about 10, 15 miles long. Our deposit and project area is right in the center of that project here. And what we're planning to do is locate a quarry, a small pit in the center of the project, and then feed our mill site, which will be on the flank of this boulder rock, which is called Angel Island.
Go
ahead.
So hang on. So the where the yellow boxes, which says Cypress Clayton Valley Lithium Project, you've got a black license area around that, and you're going to say you put a quarry in the middle of that. And the quarry will actually extend from the bottom edge of this older rock formation up to the northeast, to the far northeast corner of the property boundary. Can you is your mouse visible? Can you show me where you're talking about with your mouse?
Well, I think I can. Maybe it's not visible to you.
No, I'm not seeing it. But there we go. So the older rock is to the southeast. It's the kind of the mottled. It's the top of the alluvial fan. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just remind me, where's the quarry going to be?
It would be starting right about the two L's in Valley.
Yeah.
And work its way up to the northeast, all the way to that northeastern corner of the project area.
Okay, gotcha.
Black boundary.
Good. Okay, so we've just gone straight in on the technical. I will come back to this, but I'm just going to kind of I mean, it's really good to see that you're between Reno and Las Vegas, and it's in Nevada, and kind of the infrastructure is there. Could you drop the slide, please? And I just want to just kind of orientate my brain as well around lithium. I mean, how long have you been involved with this project?
I got involved in 2017. Cypress, as company, picked up the lithium claims that are the core of the project in 2016. First drill holes went in February 2017. We advanced it from that point, doing basic processing testing in 2017, 2018, did a preliminary economic assessment and resource estimate in 2018, pre-feasibility study in 2021.
Middle of the pandemic.
Feasibility. Yep.
And
challenging time going through the pandemic, believe me. So.
And I know embarrassingly little about lithium extraction. I'm quite used to it. I know a little bit from the hard rock and the spodumene and the pegmatites, but when it comes to the direct leach extraction, either from the brines or from the clays, I need to repeat. I need to learn through repetition. So if you could just talk me through the industry from the lithium clay perspective. I'm right in thinking this is quite a new industry, isn't it?
It is. There's no producing mines yet in the lithium clay space, but there's a number of good projects that have large resources. If you took all the clay resources in the state of Nevada, added them up, you would get a very large number, which would probably put Nevada behind Bolivia and Argentina in terms of contained resources.
Okay.
The whole problem, though, is getting that lithium out of the clay. So that's the challenge.
And when you have a variety of clays in a sediment, how can you identify them easily? Can you do it with kind of spectral radiometrics? How do you know whether you've got a hectorite or an illite or a montmorillite or these different types of clay? You
pretty well have to get into spectral analysis for that, and it's not something you can do with our clay in the field. It is consistent in its mineralogy. We think we're about 70% illite, 30% montmorillonite fractions. That's pretty uniform across the property. But yeah, you'd pretty well have to go to a lab to do that determination. And
for non-geologists who might be watching this, can you just from what I can remember about a clay, it's these are ultrafine particles that were typically either formed from alteration or carried far out in a current to a very low energy environment where the clay mineral can be held in suspension in water and then it can drop down, or it forms through alteration of pre-existing minerals.
Right. And in our case, it's an alteration product. We believe that is an asphalt tuff that fell into a lake. And this portion of the lake where our deposit's located was preserved by the way the faulting, basin and range faulting worked in this area. So, it is an alteration product that arrived from volcanic ash. And we think the volcanic ash was the source of lithium. So
the alteration... So the ash falls and it gets altered through the contact with the water, or
there could have been some hot springs or burial event that went with that, but our focus has just been on the mining and processing of it.
When you're in that early stage of exploration, so when in 2016, 2017, when you're first working on these clays, what are the indications that you can turn this into an economic resource? Do you have to? How do you build up the confidence on a lithium clay project that this is going to be the breakthrough into production? Because it's such a young industry.
That's a good question, and it's not going to be a quick answer to that. It was still a work in progress in terms of getting to that final processing point and make sure we have all the parts working correctly. But when we started in 2017, there were indications this lithium in the clay was readily leachable, that you could just put water on it and some of the lithium would come out. Well, that turned out not to be true. We then went back into the lab, started doing different testing, and we found that sulfuric acid worked. But the sulfuric acid, you needed to elevate the temperature and get it hot and up to a temperature where the lithium was extracted. That worked for us, also works for a deposit to the west of us, Rhyolite Ridge, and also works at a place to the north, which is on the Oregon-Nevada border, which is Thacker Pass, Lithium Americas project. So all that was good, and we progressed through our pre-feasibility study on the assumption that we would be using sulfuric acid, buying sulfur, have a sulfur burner, which would then run an acid plant plus a cogeneration power plant. Well, we started looking at the supply logistics surrounding raw sulfur, and we came to the conclusion that there might be a better way to do this, particularly since we're in this chloride basin. It's rich in sodium chloride brine. That's the primary water source next to us. You saw the evaporation pools of Silver Peak in that opening slide. So we went back, did a lot more lab work, and realized that hydrochloric acid, which we can generate from a chloride brine through electrolysis, was a good reagent for us. And that got us shifted away from the sulfuric acid approach to using sodium chloride and then breaking that down to make hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide. So just by an electrolysis approach, we can break down sodium chloride brine, make both our acid, our leaching reagent, and our neutralizing reagent at the same time. So it's an efficient process, energy consumptive, but in the scheme of things, it gives us a lot of stability in terms of our pricing and operating costs.
And I noticed in your presentation, you call this the greener option. I'm curious about the word greener, but I just wonder what you meant by that.
Well, I think that applies to not using sulfur as a source and getting away from the need to truck sulfur to the site. So we're not tied directly to the oil and gas industry, which would be your source of sulfur. And this is an approach which we are able to put say, renewable power into play, say solar and possibly geothermal. And it could give us a lot of better profile in terms of the environmental aspects.
Agreed.
Now, whether that all comes together when our feasibility study is done, we have to see what those final economics look like. But given the trend in sulfur pricing over the last 2 years, we're kind of happy with the space we're in and just relying on electric power to do this.
And what's your grid opportunity? I mean, can you get power from the grid, or is it a long way from grid?
No, we're right next to the grid. Currently, there would be a need for an additional power line to connect to the high voltage area. That's probably about a 35 mile length that we'll have to run that line. But in the particular area we're at, there is plans on the books in the next 2-3 years for high voltage power to come near us.
Yeah, good. The more research I do into the green credentials of renewable power, the less I am convinced. But that's a topic for another day, I think.
Yes, and in our case, we're just looking at first now solar as our main power source because it is a good place for it, good location, and it would give us a lot of flexibility with respect to the project.
Yeah. What about other projects that are advancing their lithium clays? Are they all going down the sulfuric acid route, or are there other companies which are progressing down the chloride route?
The only two others that are really advanced, that would be Rhyolite Ridge and Thacker Pass, are pursuing sulfuric acid. We are the only one that I know of that's going down the hydrochloric acid route at the present time.
And you've just signed a deal with, or just signed an arrangement with Crux, is that correct?
That's correct. That's on the chloralkaline plant, which is the heart of the process as far as acid generation. So they will be doing the feasibility level study on that particular portion of the plant.
Can you, you showed me earlier, just before we started the presentation, you had a nice slide on the process flow sheet. Could you pull that slide up, please? Because I think it'd be useful for me and hopefully the viewers as well to understand the process flow sheet as it exists today and what your thinking is around that.
Okay, let's see if I can get that. So for our project, we have our lithium clay. This is a bulk sample, which we excavated earlier this year. That would be our mine feed.
Is that the picture on the right?
That is a picture on the right.
How many tons did you take out in your bulk sample?
That was right about 500 tons on the excavation. And we run about a ton a day through the pilot plant at present.
And was that, how did you select that bulk sample? Was it from a series of different pits, or was it from one contiguous area?
It was from about a 50-foot deep cut that was in the center of our planned starter pit for the feasibility.
Yeah, okay.
So we had some drilling around it, which indicated the grade. We've been crushing, screening, and bagging it since we excavated back in June. And that material in the sampling fits right perfectly with our planned ore grade, which is about 0.112 to 0.12% lithium.
That's kind of, thank you. You've answered my next question, which is what is the grade of the sample relative to the grade of the resource?
For the process in the mine, we are looking to get somewhere around 80% extraction recovery. And in doing that, we would produce about 1 kilo of lithium, roughly, per ton of ore. And then that would equate to about 5 kilos then of lithium carbonate product. So then you can figure economics going from that point.
Yeah. So 1 kilogram lithium is about, so what's that, 5 kilograms of
lithium carbonate?
Lithium. Okay, great. Thank you.
Right.
So you've got your 500-ton bulk sample. You can feed it through at 1 ton per day. So you've got, in theory, plenty of days, or well, not in theory, you've got plenty of days of test work that you can do. So the mine feed goes through to an attritor. What's that? Is that a
that is pretty much just a mill, a small high-speed mill, which breaks the clay particles down when you add processed water to it. So this is all, mind you, in the pilot plant. I think I could show you a picture of the pilot plant upcoming. But from the attritor, we take that slurry, which is about 30% solids, and we feed it into our leach tank. We add hydrochloric acid at about 6% concentration. We heat that tank up to above 50 degrees C, and then we discharge that slurry into a bank of thickeners. And we use, in this case, 5 thickeners, which are just mixer settlers. We pull the slurry off of the bottom of the first tank and run that slurry into the second tank, and so forth, with the decant coming from the left to right and the solids going from right to left in that figure. And in doing that, we wind up washing out the lithium from the tails. So what we're trying to produce is a nice, clean, filtered tail at the end of the day. And that's what you see in the photo in the top left-hand corner.
So, but the leaching process takes place outside of the thickeners, or is it still being leached as you go through the thickeners?
It's mostly completed by the time we hit that CCD1 tank. And from that CCD1 over to the left on CCD5, we're doing a washing process where we're taking clean processed water from the left and moving that processed water over to CCD1 on the right. The figure's not exactly correct. We pull the pregnant leach solution off from CCD1, and then we run it through a filter, and then it's off to the DLE process, the lithium recovery area. And I saw that one person was asking on a chat board recently, are we doing this in a batch process, emptying the tanks and then filling them? No, this is a continuous flow process, as we would have in a conventional mill, where we're just removing the slurry from point A to point B, pulling the solution from the CCD5 over to CCD1. At that point, it's loaded up with lithium, and we move that through a filter. The pregnant leach solution then goes into lithium recovery. That's the ion exchange area. We concentrate the lithium there, reject the cations, and then move that over to the evaporator at the right. And
okay,
so the product comes out as lithium carbonate after we've processed it and then further evaporation and crystallization.
Forgive my lack of knowledge of mineral processing, but the clay is presumably very fine grained.
Yes, it is. It's less than 5 microns.
Less than 5 microns. Okay, and so when you slurry it up in that attritor and then put it into the acid solution, what you're effectively doing is leaching the lithium out of these 5 micron particles, which are in suspension because it's presumably agitated, and the lithium goes into solution, and the clay is stripped of the lithium but just remains as a clay particle.
Correct. Yeah, and you've also broken down the clay a bit too. You converted probably some of that illite over to we think montmorillonite at that point. Okay,
so the acid actually kind of attacks the clay as well as leaching the lithium, and then really what those thickeners are effectively just a separation process. So you've already done the chemical step is done in the leach bubble, and then the thickeners are almost like a physical separation. You're trying to get the pregnant leach solution separated from the clay particles.
Correct. Yeah, and that separation process, given that you're dealing with the clay, can be very tricky. That's what we found with the sulfuric acid approach. Was we wound up more with like a silica gel than we did particles in suspension. When we went to hydrochloric acid, we were able to get those particles to settle in a reasonably short period of time. It was almost a night and day revelation. And we can do this now. We add a bit of flocculant to that slurry. And as it's going through those thickeners, we are building these flocculant strings, which then cake up and they settle very nicely. And that's how we wind up with that final tailings product.
Okay. And I was kind of laboring the point just because, clay is normally in a plant, they gum everything up. They're one of the last things you want. One of the problems in a mineral processing plant is when you have clays. And so when your entire plant is processing clay, I just wonder what your learning process has been as you've been working on this over the years. Yes,
well, that switch over from using sulfuric acid to hydrochloric acid, that was almost a one-day revelation. We were up at Continental Metallurgical Services. They had a garage shop lab up in Butte, Montana. I think it was a November, December night, and we were up there at midnight working a bulk leach test on this, the first one with hydrochloric acid. And we left the lab something 1 in the morning and came back at 6 in the morning, looked in the tank, and the sun settled. How did it do that? We were expecting to spend a day or two filtering and trying to get the slurry away from the tails using sulfuric acid. And this was just a night and day revelation. So that was a nice breakthrough. And that will pretty well fix us on this path with hydrochloric acid.
Okay. So do you think your peers or your competitors are going to follow you down this hydrochloric acid route? I mean, if it's that much of a transformation, does this mean that this is going to be the way that lithium clays are developed in the future?
Not necessarily. I think we are in a unique location, given that we are in this chloride basin. We have the salt source right next to us in the water, and we don't have to import salt to make the process work. And there's possible that some other operation would try to do that and bring salt in to drive the process. That's certainly doable. But I think Cypress, we're in a kind of a unique place, unique situation, and that's kind of the way we formulated the process.
But I mean, if you're trucking in sulfur or salt, each are going to have their own costs. However, if the result is that the one creates a kind of a silica gel which gums up your plant, and the other is a tailings product that can be filtered and separates nicely, I mean, surely you would go for the one that works better in the process plant. I mean, you said yourself, it was a one-day transformation. It was night and day.
Yeah, well, that's in our particular case. I can't speak for other people's projects or deposits. If they're similar to ours with similar mineralogy, that might be well true. So
interesting. Okay, so a hydrochloric route, that's fine. I get that. When I look at your plans for the year, or kind of your forward-looking elements of your presentation, you're talking about completing the feasibility study and doing some more geology and updating the resource. What's the order of that? I mean, when you talk about completing the feasibility study, is that completing the metallurgical test work, or how does that work? Because normally I would complete the new resource, get that figure out, get the geology sorted out, and then tack on the feasibility study. But I wasn't sure what the order was from the presentation.
Yeah, we've already updated the resource model, and the mine plans are pretty well finished at this point. We've got a production schedule that's carved out.
Okay.
So the next step on the feasibility is taking all the process data we've gathered from the pilot plant over the last year and assembling that, sending it out for quotations on the equipment, doing the sizing on the pipes and pumps and tanks, And that work is very well advanced. I would say we're probably 2 months out from having all of that assembled, costed up, and then ready to throw into the cash flow model. The remaining piece is the ThyssenKrupp acid plant. We need to know up to a feasibility level what that capital and operating cost is going to look like. And hopefully everything comes in the way we think, and it's not going to give us any surprises.
What do they tell you in terms of timing?
Oh, they're it's a 4-month study. It's about 16 weeks on their chart. Okay. And that's the whole reason we let everybody know that that's our plan, and pushing out the feasibility date on that basis.
So you think you're going to be the first lithium carbonate clay producer?
Oh, I think we're on our way to doing that. If you're on the sulfuric acid side, the nice thing about that, it gives you an easier route to get to lithium hydroxide, which is a desirable product for most battery plants. But in our case, we had good success in making lithium carbonate, really good pure product. So with that, we decided not to try to beat the horse and invent something new in going from chloride solution over into hydroxide. We just said, let's keep it simple and just go right for the carbonate and get the feasibility going.
How does that affect your kind of bottom line in terms of all your marketing potential? Does it restrict the number of people that you can sell it to, or are you quite comfortable with the terminal market or the end market for lithium carbonate?
I think in the current regime, we're comfortable that it's going to be a sellable product and people will be able to take it. And if they need to convert it over to hydroxide, they can do that. It's harder to ship hydroxide. It's less stable. And I think this is a sound approach for us to follow right now. If we have to go back and think whether we need to add the equipment to do a conversion over to hydroxide, we can do that. But our priority right now is getting through the feasibility, making that last step in integrating the acid plant into the plan and seeing how all that plays together. Are
you including a marketing study inside the feasibility study?
Yeah, definitely do.
And so what are you looking at? Are you looking internationally, but also internally within the States? Because I noticed your presentation at the front end is very much, about the commodity, about the critical minerals aspect of it. I mean, are you very much focused on the Made in America story?
Yes, definitely. Given a lot of the legislation that's come through recently, the last 2 years, particularly with the Inflation Reduction Act and the Strategic Metals Loans Program, all that is playing into our thought process and wanting a domestic source. So, and there's, I don't know, roughly about 13 battery factories that are planned in the U.S. So, we want to be able to fit into that picture and keep it on shore.
Good. Thank you. I understand the company much better now, and particularly that processing differential between the sulfuric acid and the hydrochloric acid. Just kind of by way of kind of drawing to a close, could you give me just remind me of the kind of the news flow that you've got over the next few months, possibly into the middle of next year?
Oh, well, definitely most of the news is going to be driven around the feasibility study, getting that completed. There's potential there for some partnerships that might evolve, either related to vendors or companies that might be interested in the project itself. And then we'll be working our way towards financing and permitting. We're close to completing a plan of operations, which would kick off our permitting process with the federal government. We have a team in place on the environmental and permitting side. So,
when do you hope to deliver the feasibility study?
I think we're end of first quarter, maybe first part of second quarter next year.
Okay, and have you started doing the kind of the long lead items on the permitting, such as baseline studies, water monitoring, speaking to kind of federal agencies about just making sure that you've got all that key permitting pipeline in movement, in motion?
We've done quite a few baseline studies over the course of the last 2 years. We do have those studies that indicate that permitting should be fairly straightforward, we think. We do know what the permitting steps are, the plan of operations, putting that together and putting that in front of the federal government's the first step in that process. And that should happen shortly. So on the water side, we're fortunate that we are permitted. We have a water permit in place, and that's an advantage for us given the water situation in Clayton Valley. And
which is what? That is arid?
It's arid, plus it's a closed basin. So everything in the basin in terms of water rights are fully appropriated. We're one of, say, 3 significant water rights. Most of those are held by Albemarle for their brine operation. And
you've done the test work to show that you've got enough drawdown capacity to meet our water requirements.
Yeah, we believe with the water balance out of the project right now, our water right that we have, which we purchased last year, will be sufficient to give us that target production rate we have for the feasibility.
How much did it cost you, just out of interest, out of curiosity?
Well, that was a $3 million purchase. It was $1 million in cash and $2 million in stock. Excuse me, $2 million in cash, $1 million in stock.
From who?
There was a smaller company, junior company, that acquired that water right.
Wow. You can trade anything, I guess. And my grandmother's up to say.
Can. It's particularly when it's very scarce and hard to come by.
Yeah.
You mentioned the differences between looking at brine and looking at spodumene hard rock. So I just want to touch on the clay space. As far as what we're trying to do is kind of like you would with a process where you're taking that source, the clay, the ore, all the way to a final product. We want to carry that chain to go all the way from clay to that lithium carbonate product on the site. And if you're in the hard rock space, you are probably making a spodumene concentrate and then finding a equivalent of a smelter, a conversion plant. Most likely right now in Asia, there are some conversion plants planned for the US, and then shipping that concentrate and then having them do the roasting, do the leaching, to then go through the purification steps and make a lithium product. So in that sense, we were talking about base metals before, that resembles a smelter model where you're finding somebody to take your concentrate, process it, and then wind up with a product at the end of the day. For us, we want to just make that a one-day process where we put the ore into the mill and wind up with a lithium product. If you're talking about brines, if you're going the conventional route on brines, which is evaporation, you're looking at anywhere from, say, 1.5 to 2.5 years to evaporate that solution down and get it to the concentration that you can then make, do the evaporation step, the final step, and precipitate your product. So where we want to come in is somewhere in the cost structure between that brine and then that hard rock. Brines are the cheapest source cost-wise for lithium. Hard rock is at the other end of the scale. And we hope that by doing our process, which is more like a hydromet, say SXEW for copper or leaching for gold, you fall in between and you're making a product. So you're controlling your own destiny that way.
Yeah, I get it. Is there anybody else globally who's doing the chloride route, the hydrochloric acid route?
Well, for different metals, yes. That's where you go after rare earths and and other things. And, you use hydrochloric acid in fracking. So, it's not like it's an uncommon approach. So,
but so far, no one is doing it on the lithium clays.
No, we will be the first at that.
Bill, thank you so much. It's been a hugely instructive 40 minutes or so.
Well, great, Merlin. It's a pleasure talking with you, and hope we do it again.